The problem with Donald Trump is that he's bringing Vladimir Putin to the table in the worst possible ways while undermining Ukraine and the Ukrainian position. Ukraine has understandable demands in this negotiations process. Okay. Let's talk about Zelensky. Okay. As I said earlier, turns out that the American government does have the capability of stopping the flow of to a foreign nation. You might have been confused by this. You might have been shocked by this if you were watching anything happening with Israel. It seems like we have an inability to stop the flow to a country that is offensively committing. But we certainly do have the capabilities of stopping the flow of to a country that is defending itself from a foreign nation. So let's take a look. As Donald Trump has said yesterday that he is going to stop the weapons flow into Ukraine. Here is the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying what Ukraine will do next without U.S. aid. Dear Ukrainians, today many people have the same question. What will happen next with U.S. assistance? I've instructed Ukraine's Minister of Defense, the heads of our intelligence agencies and our diplomats to contact their counterparts in the United States. Are you going to stay on until the State of the Union tonight? It's at 6 p.m. So yes, the answer is yes. I will be live and alive during the State of the Union. It's not an official State of the Union, by the way. To contact their counterparts in the United States and to obtain official information. People should not have to guess. Ukraine and America deserve a respectful dialogue and a clear position from one another, especially when it comes to protecting lives during a full-scale war. Of course, in Ukraine, we have been receiving various signals for weeks now, and there's already been a precedent for aid being halted. There was a suspension of humanitarian aid, of energy aid. There was also a halt in military aid at the end of January. But at that time, everything was quickly resumed. We saw the risks. Therefore, our agencies, both military and special services, managed to develop action algorithms for any developments in the situation. This is not 2022 anymore. Our resilience is stronger now. We have the means to defend ourselves. But for us, maintaining normal partnership-based relations with America is essential to bringing the war to a real end. No one wants an endless war. Ukraine will always be grateful to the U.S. for all the support that has been and is being provided, which is working to preserve the now rather fragile foundations of security in Europe. After all, this is not just about our country. It is about everyone in Europe. We seek constructive cooperation, partnership-based relations. We can only regret what happened at the White House instead of our negotiations. But we must find the strength to move forward, to respect one another, just as we have always respected America, Europe, and all of our partners. And to do everything together to bring peace closer. And thank everyone who is supporting Ukraine in this effort. Today I've spoken with the president of Finland. What? Yeah, Trump already claimed that they got the deal, I know. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Prime Minister of Greece, Prime Minister of Croatia, and NATO Secretary General, and the leader of Germany's CDU party, Friedrich Merz, the very party that won the recent Bundestag elections, clear support for Ukraine. Thank you. About significant funds. And then he just talks about Ukraine deserves respect. Here. He says that there's consultations. Ukrainians deserve peace. Ukrainians deserve respect. Their positions or demands regarding Ukraine. We know... Okay, here. We know the Russians have not changed their positions or demands regarding Ukraine. They will insist on reducing our army. They will seek a legal renunciation of our territories, as well as a significant political deformation of Ukraine with the weakening of the Ukrainian constitution. Okay, I can't read the rest of that. So, is it possible for Trump to leave NATO? Liberals I know seem to believe not. I don't think so either, but who knows, man? He is pretty spicy. Why am I seeing some of my leftist friends talking about how the peace talks are actually good and that everyone against them are warmongers? I mean, peace talks are actually good. I am one of those leftists as well. I think that peace talks are good. I've been an advocate for peace talks and an advocate to bring Vladimir Putin to the table. The problem with Donald Trump is that he's bringing Vladimir Putin to the table in the worst possible ways while undermining Ukraine and the Ukrainian position. Ukraine has understandable demands in this negotiations process. Okay? What do you mean? We have used and abused Ukrainians as we've given them our older and basically told them, you know, you're kind of on your own there. All right, go off. Defend your nation from being invaded. Doesn't Zelensky support Israel? Yes, of course he does. He is. He also has been groveling for American support for, while also still trying to maintain some semblance of dignity at the same time. But like, obviously, he's still going to do what Big Dog tells him to do. And you need to understand something. You know, his support for Israel might be because he truly loves Israel. His support for Israel might also most likely be because he obviously can't say anything about Israel. Israel, alongside the United States of America and Russia, voted not to condemn Russia for invading Ukraine a couple weeks ago. He has no choice in this process. Zelensky has no choice in this process. Okay? He does not. Trump's foreign policy of neo-imperialism is very dangerous, but Dems and centrists, at least the Atlantic crowd, are doing a very good job of explaining why, because they're obsessed with the dystopia and NATO fetish. Actually explaining how neo-imperialism will lead to more wars would be better. Jason Ponton, I'm really not enjoying the latest iteration of Jeet here as a more literate version of Glenn Greenwald, far more animated by opposition. The forces of reaction wouldn't be winning if it weren't for the incompetence and intellectual myopia of centrist elites. We have to solve the centrist problem to have a fighting chance against fascism. I agree. Complaining Zelensky supporting Israel is like complaining that Gaza doesn't have gay rights law. Not entirely. Because one is a defense of an apartheid genocide, doing a genocide with Americans that unironically ends up harming the Ukrainian position. And the other is a group of people that have been captive by a belligerent occupier being genocided. Like, Ukraine is still, at the end of the day, a sovereign nation, you know? No. A better comparison would be like saying Ukrainians don't have gay rights either, so they're not woke. I don't care about that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, oh, Ukraine is not woke about gay and trans people either is a incredibly stupid argument to bring forward in terms of like defending Ukraine.
More than 24 hours after Donald Trump abruptly paused all U.S. military aid to Ukraine, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling his Oval Office spat with the president regrettable. In a new post on X, he reiterates Ukraine's commitment to peace.
Yeah, I mean, he's like slowly walking it back.
Writing, quote, "None of us wants an endless war." He adds that Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table. And although Zelensky doesn't use the post to directly apologize to Trump, as some White House officials have argued he should do, he did express his gratitude for U.S. support, something he has done frequently, including during an address to Congress the first time he visited the United States as president of Ukraine after Russia invaded the country. White House officials say the pause in aid will stand until President Trump determines Zelensky is serious about working out a peace plan and a path to end the war with Russia. Losing assistance from the United States, especially its Patriot missile defense system, could have dire consequences for Ukraine. The Prime Minister of Ukraine says it's the only tool the country has to protect itself from Russian ballistic missiles. Joining us now to discuss is retired U.S. Army Major Mike Lyons. Sir, thank you so much for being with us. Right off the bat, what is the effect of this pause in U.S. aid to Ukraine on the battlefield?
Well, Boris, I don't see any.
I'm confused. What does Zelensky have to apologize for? Okay. Let me explain this one more time because there's a lot of new people in here. Okay. What the truth is on an entirely different zip code, if not an entirely different planet than what must happen for Trump. Okay. Zelensky can't do anything. Donald Trump has made up his mind. He thinks Zelensky is bad. He is a liberal. He's annoying. And because Donald Trump and the American government holds all the cards, okay, they can basically keep humiliating him and bullying him in broad daylight over and over and over again. There's nothing he can do in this process. If he wore a suit, that wouldn't have changed the dynamic. If he said thank you more, even though he said thank you a million times in this conversation that took place in the Oval Office, that would not have changed the dynamic. Okay? They hate him. He kissed the ring a million times over, and they still claim he's not kissing the ring hard enough. Now, there's also the truth of the matter. If you look at the circumstances in front of Ukraine, they're running out of manpower, and the additional weapons that are sent into Ukraine is not necessarily going to change the dynamic of the battlefield, at least according to seemingly the American State Department as well. Okay? This is precisely the reason why there needs to be a managed negotiation to end the Russian occupation without America looking like they suffered any sort of blow. And I think Trump's attitude here is basically to say, oh, I wasn't even in favor of Ukraine to begin with, in a way to save face. If I were to go inside of Trump's mind, okay, and try to understand how he operates, I suspect that he looks at the situation as there's nothing more you can do. Like, you know, they've taken 20% of your territory. There's not really anything you can do without American support to begin with. And this is the new battle lines that have been drawn and hardened. Okay? And that I don't even care about the minerals in general. That the minerals themselves are not exactly a thing for us to treasure, because virtually everyone that looks at the situation, all the analysts say like the rare earth minerals are not necessarily all that bountiful, right? And a lot of them are on the Russian annexed territory anyway. So I think he's just trying to find a managed, negotiated surrender that saves face for America and also stops Ukraine from getting pummeled. That's what I think. He also simultaneously likes Vladimir Putin, obviously, perhaps in a weird way. So he's just looking at the situation and he's just going like, what are you saying? What are you going to do about it? There's nothing you can do in this process with or without us. So I think Donald Trump thinks he's giving an olive branch to Ukraine in his mind in this like fucked up way, where he thinks like, I suspect he thinks that putting together a managed negotiation that will save face for America by actively undermining Ukraine, I guess in his mind, I don't think it's correct. And because then he's just like saying Ukraine is the wrong, Ukraine is the party that was in the wrong and not the wronged party. And we didn't care about it. It was like pure Democratic Party nonsense to begin with. And yeah, he'll get whatever he can in the process. That's what I think. That's what I think Trump is thinking. And he's like, how dare you speak out against me? He's already narcissistic. He's already incredibly thin-skinned. So I think he's just looking at the situation and going like, do you see what the fuck's going on? Bro, have you seen the map of Ukraine's minerals? What are you talking about? I have. What do you mean? We've covered it extensively. I think the most frustrating thing is that Trump has never really been challenged or spoken about the underlying basis for the war. Every single time it comes up, he defers to his dumbass, it would have never happened if I was president bullshit, which doesn't say anything. Yeah, that was why he was so offended when Zelensky was like, no, under your leadership, you know, Vladimir Putin violated the ceasefire agreements, the previous ceasefire agreements as well. That's why he like lost his mind, because it directly contradicts his narrative that Vladimir Putin was afraid of me and he would never dare to violate this ceasefire under my watch. I don't understand why you think Ukraine will bow down to the USA, because there is still, in all of this madness, there is still truth to what Trump is saying in terms of the conditions on the battlefield. There's also truth when Trump says, we hold all the cards. Without us, you have nothing. It's hard to hear and it's fucked up. And especially when you do have all the cards, you should never say that. Powerful people should never actually bully those who have less power than them. But because Donald Trump is a fucking asshole, he just straight up is saying, you know, you got nothing. MAGA Hasan? No, this is not MAGA at all. It is not MAGA to recognize that Ukraine's current issue is not just weapons. Weapons will certainly help, but it's not just weapons, it's beyond that. I've maintained this position already. I've maintained this position for a couple years at this point. But you can't look at the situation in terms of the crisis of manpower in Ukraine when they just don't have enough people to hold the weapons to begin with, and then see it as anything but like a stalemate at this point is possibly better overall. A stalemate, and then most likely some insurgencies that take place within the Russian boundaries, the annexed territories.
Any positive outcomes from this change here? I think tactically, I always look through the eyes of the soldier and how they view this. And I think if they get this news at the front lines, they're going to be disappointed in the United States. I think right now the front lines are focused on drone warfare as well as artillery fire and artillery ammunition. So if you're a cannoneer on the front lines, you're looking at that pallet of ammunition behind you, wondering if it's going to be replaced. So I think in some ways the tactical implications are somewhat limited, and they might not be impactful for let's say the next few weeks. But over time, as air defense platforms degrade and they shoot missiles down and they're shooting things down that they're not being reinforced there, I think there's going to be real problems with the Ukraine military trying to keep up to what's going on.
To your point about seeking that next pallet of ammunition, how much longer do you think Ukraine has to sustain that artillery and ballistic missile defense without U.S. help?
Well, they likely have months, not necessarily weeks. And as again, they've built some defenses up themselves. But what will happen is Russia will look to go on the offensive and try to break through in certain areas and weaken Ukraine defenses and force them to play economy of force missions and to reinforce areas where they might not want to. It'll clearly keep them on the defense. We just also know specifically what this means, the fact that we're not giving military support. You know, you've got European soldier commands training soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers in Vilsek and Grafenwehr and places. Does that mean that training stops for them as well? What about intel? What about other things that the United States has been providing? So again, there's a short-term impact. What will happen tactically on the ground? Obviously, we know the strategic impacts over the long run. Ukraine would be able to sustain any kind of defenses against Russia if this lasts very much longer.
How far do you think European backing, the EU's backing, can go without that backstop of the United States?
Unfortunately, the European industrial base, it won't crank up fast enough to help Ukraine. It's going to take a year or so in order for some of the more advanced European defense contractors to provide any kind of material that will help Ukraine. The United States has the war footing right now with the amount of artillery ammunition that we're supplying with them. It's increased over the past few years, and Europe won't be able to backstop that. So that's where there's a race against time right now. The United States needs to continue to support Ukraine, at least right now for these negotiations. Look, Donald Trump doesn't know whether Russia wants to stop. He knows he wants Ukraine to stop. He knows he wants the war to stop. But we don't know whether he knows Russia wants to stop. And I think this mineral deal will help put in implied security assurances for Ukraine. But the question is going to be, what are Russian demands in order for Ukraine to stop? They might.
I'm not kidding when I say this, but I do see one way out of this for Ukraine, and that is using the mad dog of the West. The only country that is in NATO that is actually directly engaged in active conflict with not one but two other NATO nations. The country that happens to have the second largest standing military. I'm serious when I say this. I mean, this would make up for the manpower issue that Ukraine has. It would obviously continue the war, but I'm not kidding when I say this. It would be the only country. It would be the only country that NATO Article 5 would not be put forth like instantly. I mean, this is insane. This is insane. Of course, it's just not going to happen. But I don't even know. I don't even know at this point.
Might be too much, and perhaps this will cause this administration to turn around and send more military aid to Ukraine, as the Russians still have a voice as to whether or not this conflict will end as well.
Historic enemies, by the way. Russia. Historic enemies, just saying.
Major Mike Lyons, appreciate your point of view. Thanks for joining us.
And back to our top story this hour, Donald Trump's suspension.
Turkey buying air defense systems from Russia. I know, dog. You know what else Turkey did, though? Destroyed Russia's, destroyed any sort of Russian interference or control it had over the Middle East. Like literally happened in the past couple of months. Did you guys not pay attention to that? Look at Syria. Stop trolling. Turkey ain't sending any of their own troops. Yeah, no, I don't think that that's going to happen. I'm memeing.
Of all U.S. military aid to Ukraine. That includes critical ammunition, advanced weapons.
I mean, Turkey has been backing Ukraine. Turkey always plays both sides, dog. What do you mean? Turkey has never not played both sides. Think about one of the most significant aspects of Ukrainian defense, the Bayraktar. That's a Turkish drone, you know?
Military vehicles. Most significantly, it also includes Patriot air defense missiles. Those US-provided weapons have been a game changer, really, for Ukraine, allowing it to protect its skies from Russian attacks. Now, Kyiv is saying it could run out of them in a matter of weeks. Europe is scrambling to adjust to this new reality. The EU is pledging a new $150 billion loans program to help countries in the bloc boost their defense spending and increase their support for Ukraine. And it comes as the Trump administration is trying to get Kyiv to sign a rare minerals deal with the US and a peace deal with Russia. Just take a listen to US Vice President J.D. Vance speaking on Fox News.
If you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
A collapse of U.S. military support for NATO is a great development for Turkey. It's the second largest military in NATO after the U.S. and also has a burgeoning defense industrial export base. This is true. It is precisely these people, strangers to us, who know what respect is, and that is how it should be, and that is how it will be, says Ukrainian militant. Why does Turkey want Ukraine into NATO? I don't think Turkey wants. I don't think Turkey wants Ukraine in NATO. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm completely oblivious to this, but. I think Turkey's wishes are inconsequential. What matters is probably countries like France and Germany.
Well, CNN's Claire Sebastian takes a look now at the role the U.S. weapons...
Or even the United States of America. Like, the U.S. likes Ukraine not in NATO as well. That way they can use Ukraine as a way to strike at Russia without ever facing repercussions from Russia. Please, if your starting position on this is that NATO is a defensive pact, you're never going to understand the motivations behind why America is doing things the way that they're doing them. Okay? Trump doesn't want that, though. No, the American State Department has never been like, we are legitimately considering it. They've only dangled it because they have Kurdified the Ukrainian nation state. Okay? That's it.
Have played in Ukraine's war effort and whether Kyiv and Europe can make up the shortfall. Have a look at this.
A U.S. long-range ATACMS missile in action in Ukraine, just one of the highly sophisticated U.S. weapons arguably keeping Ukraine in this fight now in doubt. Well, it's clear that the U.S. has become an indispensable player in Ukraine's defense. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky estimated in January that the U.S. alone provides about 40%, you can see it there on the red section, of Ukraine's annual weapons requirements. Europe takes about 30%, but Ukraine has also ramped up production, up here in orange, ready to supply, the president says, around a third of its own needs. Well, that's compared to 10%, Zelensky says, at the start of the war. So you can see the growth there. And if you take a look at this chart, you can see Ukraine has had to grapple with unpredictable U.S. supplies before. This shows total donations from the U.S. versus Europe, the U.S. there in red. It's compiled by the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. And it's clear that the U.S. started to lag significantly in the second half of 2023. That was when military aid stalled in Congress. It then picked up again towards the end of 2024 as the Biden administration rushed to use up all of the congressionally approved funds. This is not just about quantity. It's clear that it's the high-tech U.S. weapons that have given Ukraine really the ability to fight back, from the HIMARS missiles launchers that started arriving in June of 2022, allowing Ukraine to hit behind Russian lines, to then the Patriot air defense systems approved in December of that year. Still, Ukraine says, the only system that can stop Russian ballistic missiles. This now the biggest area of concern for Ukraine as Russia ramps up air attacks. And then, of course, the ATACMS
Nice way of getting banned, RIP Bozo. I don't know if you know this, chatter, but I'm live right now of a streamer who is currently live, which means that I'm not banned anymore.
Longer range missiles, first used in October of 2023 and last November, authorized by the Biden administration for use on Russian soil. Now, if we look at the frontline map, you can see where we are now. Shortages won't be immediate, but without a deal to reverse this decision, this already fragile front line could be in serious jeopardy. Claire Sebastian, CNN, London.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for being with us.
Good to see you, man.
Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Let's go back to the Oval Office Friday.
Yeah, by the way, oh, this is such a gross interview. I watched this. He was so proud of the way he butted in and talked about how, you didn't say thank you. You didn't say thank you enough. Like, he's such a lame-ass coward. Turkish mining industry is almost entirely composed of foreign mining corporations. I don't think Erdogan sees anything to gain out of Ukraine, even if he had control over it. They had the conflicting support for both Russia and Ukraine, mostly because Erdogan wanted to sell Bayraktars. Why would Erdogan want Turkish soldiers in Ukraine? Maybe to make EU more dependent on Turkey as a security force, but that feels too far-sighted for Erdogan. No, I don't think that feels too far-sighted for Erdogan, but that would be the only motivation for this. I mean, also, I'm not even entertaining that. I was just throwing that out as a joke. Like, that is a very far-fetched thing. Turkey in proximity to Russia Turkey is very close to Russia in proximity.
NATO and even offered a
supports restoring Ukraine's pre-2014 borders, supports Ukraine joining NATO. I mean, this doesn't mean anything. Offered a post-war security guarantee to Ukraine.
Post-war security
guarantee. Yeah, like the main point of contention here is post-war security for Ukraine. The main point of contention here is post-war security for Ukraine. America obviously is not going to do it with American troops. Okay, because if Russia kills an American troop, then boom, all of a sudden, two nuclear powers are at war with one another. Turkey, on the other hand, is a wild card inside of NATO. That's why I said this could be a way out, a win-win-win-win-win situation. If they throw 10 billion euros to Erdogan, he will march the army himself. Bayrak sallayarak gider.
Guarantee. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how Turkey's Ukraine posture has changed and what might have motivated this sudden shift. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So let's start with a bit of context and explain how Turkey has positioned itself throughout the Ukraine war. True to form, Turkish President Recep Erdogan has tried to play both sides. And, well, he's sort of succeeded.
Oh, he has succeeded. Recep Tayyip Erdogan always plays both sides. And as a consequence of playing both sides, he always comes out on top. That's how it is, baby.
For starters, Turkey has enjoyed a series since the invasion. Erdogan has pretty good relations with Putin, despite Turkey being a NATO member, and Turkey hosted the first round of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in March 2022. While these negotiations promptly collapsed, Erdogan then played a key role in negotiating the Black Sea grain deal in July 2022, which allowed Ukrainian farmers to export their grain via the Turkish Straits, with monitoring from the Turkish authorities. As well as burnishing Turkey's diplomatic credentials, Erdogan's ambivalence also has helped the Turkish economy. Turkey's economy looked pretty vulnerable when the war began. Thanks to Erdogan's unorthodox monetary policy, inflation was already running at about 50% year-on-year in January 2022, and the sanctions-induced rise in global energy prices threatened to make everything a whole lot worse. However, Turkey weathered the storm pretty well. Turkey refused to join with most sanctions, which meant that they were able to both import Russian energy and act as a transit hub for Russian oil and gas. Lots of Russian cash also flowed into Turkey to avoid sanctions, which provided Turkey with a much-needed source of foreign currency, while Turkish defense companies made serious money selling drones and infantry carriers to Ukraine. In 2023, Turkey refused to immediately let Sweden and Finland into NATO, which both pleased the Kremlin and allowed Turkey to extract various concessions from other NATO members. Then, just last year, Turkey again stepped in as a mediator to negotiate a prisoner swap, which included...
We are the table, baby. We are the table.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich. You get the idea then. Turkey has played both sides, continuing to trade with both Russia and Ukraine, while using its unique position as a relatively Russia-friendly NATO member to position itself as a much-needed mediator. However, in the past couple of weeks, Turkey has started sounding conspicuously pro-Ukraine. This really began on Tuesday last week, when, just a few hours after Russian and American officials met in Saudi Arabia, Zelensky paid a surprise visit to Ankara. At the joint press conference afterwards, Erdogan insisted that Ukraine and Europe should be included in the negotiations, reaffirmed his support for Ukraine's territorial integrity as, quote, non-negotiable, essentially implying that he expected Ukraine to retake all of its pre-2014 territory, including Crimea, and even came out in support of Ukraine's NATO membership. This all directly contradicted the Trump administration, who had pursued negotiations without Ukraine or Europe, suggested that Ukraine will have to accept some territorial losses, and dismissed Ukraine's NATO aspirations as unrealistic. This was followed by similar comments from the Turkish foreign minister, who this week reaffirmed Turkey's support for Ukrainian NATO membership, suggested that Turkey could act as a security guarantor in the event of a ceasefire, and encourage Europe to pivot away from the US, arguing that reducing dependency on the US will make them more resilient. Now, it's important not to overstate.
Okay, the real reason why I said Turkey could play this role is because America has often in the Middle East used Turkey as the middleman in many affairs that they do not want to be seen directly involved in, whether it be Syria or even ISIS. That is Turkey's major role. This could be yet another opportunity. This way, Turkey gets to, this way America gets to save face and say, oh, we're not doing this ourselves, and then use Turkey to be the middleman, the envoy. A country that already has the precedent of violating pre-existing NATO contracts and NATO security. I don't think Donald sees Turkey as a country. No, he does. I mean, it's not him. It's people in his corner.
State all of this. Turkey has always supported Ukraine's territorial integrity, and Erdogan has a bit of a habit of flip-flopping on foreign policy. Nonetheless, it's at least true that Turkey sounds a lot more pro-Ukraine all of a sudden. And, well, this is good news for Zelensky. So, what's motivated this shift? Well, as we see it, there are at least 4 possible reasons. Firstly, Erdogan has made it clear that he still wants to mediate, and is probably trying to keep Ukraine on side by convincing Kyiv that they won't force an unfavorable that Trump is apparently trying to negotiate with Russia. Second, it's part of a wider turn in international opinion against Russia and the US. This became glaringly apparent in Monday's UN General Assembly vote, where just a handful of countries voted with the US and Russia against the European resolution calling for an end to the war in Ukraine. This is essentially because, while the war looked a bit like a NATO-Russia proxy war before, which meant that countries which weren't super keen on the West were reluctant to throw their weight behind Ukraine, now Trump and Russia are apparently on the same side. It looks more like plain old neo-imperialism, the big countries bullying the small countries. Erdogan has long advocated for a multipolar world, rather than one dominated by the traditional superpowers, so it's not surprising that he's resisting Trump here. Third, Turkey wants Russia out of the Black Sea, which is why Erdogan is so keen on Ukraine recovering all of its pre-2014 territory, including Crimea.
Erdogan resisting any American leadership is perhaps one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Immediately, as a Turkish person, I laugh, okay? Like, you can't say this right after Erdogan basically destroyed the Assad regime and undermined the pre-existing goodwill that they had with NATO, or goodwill that they had with Russia. Come on. Also funny to think that America's involvement with Ukraine was not neo-imperialist until Trump. Sure.
Crimea. But fourth, Turkey wants to leverage its military power to get something out of the EU. For context, Turkey is one of the largest armies in NATO, with more active troops than any European army. Erdogan has noticed that Europe needs a military power to guarantee Ukraine's security without American support.
This part is correct.
And he's offering to help if the EU gives him something in return, like letting Turkey join the EU. Erdogan actually made this explicit on Monday, when he claimed that Turkey's accession into the EU is the only way to solve the continent's security and demographic crises. This isn't the first time that Erdogan has tried to play this either. Literally hours after Trump won the US election.
Europeans are so insanely Islamophobic. There is 0%. This would collapse the EU. Okay, this has been a meta and a meme, I would say, in my opinion, for decades. My entire lifetime, EU membership for Turkey has been floated in front of Turkey in a way that is not dissimilar to Ukraine, as a matter of fact. Except, of course, Ukraine being Christian does have a likelihood. It's just not going to happen.
In November, Erdogan told reporters at the European political community that, quote, Turkey's full inclusion in the European Union defense efforts is indispensable for Europe's peace and security. Now, while it's hard to imagine Turkey actually joining the EU anytime soon, Erdogan might still be able to negotiate something like a closer economic relationship with Europe, or at least get the Europeans to turn a blind eye to his ongoing crackdown on opposition politicians. This also creates a bit of a dilemma for Europe. If Europe does actually decide to build a new security architecture outside of NATO, and we're saying Europe, not the EU here, because it will probably include the UK too, would this include Turkey? On one hand, Turkey has a strong army, a thriving defense industry, and sits at a strategically valuable position along the Black Sea and at the confluence of Europe and the Middle East. On the other hand, Erdogan has proven a somewhat unreliable and occasionally two-faced NATO ally, and
clearly, you are not European. You don't know what Turkey people want. They have been trying to join EU for years. Islamophobia in EU doesn't mean Turkey. It means other Islam countries that don't assimilate as good as Turkey. Gerizekalı benim Amerikalı olduğumu zannediyor, biliyor musun? Salak herif. İnanamıyorum yani. Bana geldi diyor ki sen Avrupalı değilsin, anlamıyorsun dedi. Ama unuttu, Türk olduğumu bilmiyor herhalde gerizekalı. İsmim Hasan abi lan. Ne diyorsun oğlum? Salak mısın sen? This has to be one of the dumbest Turks I've ever encountered in my chat. Or even funnier, he's some weird Turkish exceptionalist who also is still very much Islamophobic. Yeah, dude, Europeans make distinctions between good Muslims and bad Muslims, certainly.
Certain European countries, most notably France, are very resistant to the idea. Now, the thing is, often in politics, we need to understand a wide variety of topics to truly grasp what's going on. And fortunately, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, can help us do just that, with thousands of lessons in maths, science, programming, and AI. And not only that, their interactive lessons teach you by...
Also, what was I going to say? God damn it. All right, I'm forgetting what I was going to say. Let's get back to JD Vance.
Yep, from your perspective.
Yeah, great TV, as the president said. Yeah, well, you know, it's funny. So we have a 45 minute press conference, and the president normally does this. I mean, I've seen this now 3 or 4 times with foreign leaders, where he likes to bring the media in, likes to have a conversation, but answer questions with the press. As you know, he's very open with reporters. And what I noticed is that for the first 25, 30 or so minutes, he tried to sort of bend over backwards to be gracious and kind to Zelensky, even when Zelensky was kind of needling him, even when Zelensky was saying things that I thought were untrue. The president just tried to be diplomatic, right? I think that's his natural instinct in that situation. And then when it really went off the rails, of course, is when I asked, or you had a Polish journalist who asked a question, the president answered it, and then I answered it, and then something about my answer just really set Zelensky off. So then he came at me.
It was me.
And then I went back at him, and what I tried to do originally was actually try to diffuse the situation a little bit, because I'm like, you know, we're having this meeting. Obviously, there are 100 television cameras here. Let's try to have this conversation in private. And then the president, as we kept on going back and forth, I tried again to say, well, maybe we should have this conversation in private. And the president was like, nope, actually anymore. I want to have this actual conversation in public for the American people to see. And I do think that there was just a certain sense of, there was a lack of respect. There was a certain sense of entitlement. And most importantly, look, we can look past all of that stuff, but the president has set a very clear goal for his administration. He wants the killing to stop. And I think that it's very important that President Zelensky and, of course, President Putin, too, they've both...
Why shouldn't he lie, chat? Why shouldn't he lie? Of course. Who's going to check him? Sean Hannity? No one is even remotely interested in the truth. Why shouldn't he lie? He's lying his goddamn face off.
both got to come to the negotiating table, and that's ultimately where things broke apart. I really don't care what President Zelensky says about me or anybody else, but he showed a clear unwillingness to engage in the peace process that President Trump has said is the policy of the American people and of their president. That's the real breakdown, is I think Zelensky wasn't yet there, and I think frankly now still isn't there, but I think he'll get there eventually. He has to.
My understanding is he tried to get back in, or tried to stay a number of times, and then made numerous calls to come back. Is that true?
I don't know about numerous calls, but they certainly made at least one request to come back in and continue the conversation. The president was like, look, first of all, they were disrespectful. And second of all, what are we even going to talk about? They've shown a clear unwillingness to discuss the peaceful settlement that President Trump is trying to bring to this situation. I think a lot of Americans are sort of, it's useful to step back and ask ourselves, what is the actual plan here? You can't just fund the war forever. The American people won't stand for it. And by the way, Sean, if you look at European opinion polls, the Europeans aren't going to stand forever for it either. We need to bring this thing to a peaceful settlement. The president was trying to do that. He'll continue to try to do that, but you've got to have two to tango. You've got to have a negotiating partner in the Ukrainians who recognize that, of course they have their views, and of course they're not always going to agree with us, but they've got to participate in the conversation. They weren't willing to do that on Friday, so the president said send him home.
He said today that the war he expects will go on a very long time. I don't know where he's going to get the money to fund that war. I have my doubts that Europe will fund the war to the level that Biden and Harris were funding it. And then the issue now has come up whether or not this administration will...
I'm fucking Polish. We defend borders daily. Okay. Opinion discarded. You're talking to a Turkish man. Shut the fuck up. All right. Gotta say, in total victory, JD has really come into his own both commercially and politically. You're joking, right? Are we looking at an entirely separate video? What's happening? I'm watching JD Vance get his dick sucked by Sean Hannity while simultaneously he has pulled off the most impressive feat of all time, sucking Donald Trump off, even though he's not in the room. Okay, he is joking. All right.
Will continue to offer money and arms for this war to continue, because without America, I would argue the president was right in saying they have no cards.
Yeah, well, Sean, I think our European friends, frankly, are being really they're doing a disservice to the Ukrainians because their own populations are saying, we're not going to fund this war indefinitely. The American people are saying, we don't want to fund the war indefinitely. So the only thing that is in the best interest of America, of Russia, of Ukraine, and of Europe is to bring this thing to a close. What happened, Sean, is you have Zelensky. He goes to Europe, and a lot of our European friends puff him up. They say, you're a freedom fighter. You need to keep fighting forever. Well, fighting forever with what? With whose money, with whose ammunition, and with whose lives? The president is actually taking a much more realistic perspective and saying this can't go on forever. We can't fund this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't fight forever. So let's bring this thing to a peaceful settlement.
When I interviewed Zelensky, he wouldn't give me direct answers. I asked him about the mineral deal to pay the U.S. back. To me, there's three phases in this. And my understanding was Friday was supposed to be relatively ceremonial.
It was.
And then that it was supposed to be we signed the mineral deal. That's part one. Part two would be a ceasefire. Part three would be the hardest part, the negotiated settlement with Putin, who, correct me if I'm wrong, said he's willing to talk peace with Trump.
Yeah, he said he's willing to talk peace. And of course, we trust but verify. We want to have the conversation. We don't assume that everything. We want to engage in this conversation. But you're exactly right, Sean. When the Ukrainians came to Washington on Friday, it was supposed to be ceremonial. There had been some public back and forth, some disagreements, some words spoken in public. And the president was like, let's have this moment. We give some credit to the brave Ukrainian fighters. And of course, it's a very brave army that they have there in Ukraine. Let's sign this minerals deal, which importantly does two things. It allows the American people to get some of their money back, but it also shows the Ukrainian people that America has a long-term investment in their sovereignty. You do those things, we'll sign this thing, we'll have a rah-rah moment, and then we'll get to the tough talk of negotiating peace. We couldn't even get the Ukrainians to a point where they could talk about the peaceful settlement. And look, in some ways, Sean, I get it. I get the frustration. I get the rage. It's their country, of course.
I really sometimes feel a little bit overwhelmed. Like, this is one of those moments where virtually everything that JD Vance has said thus far, with some exceptions about like the conditions on the battlefield and whatnot, is incorrect. Like, in terms of coming to the table for a negotiated peace and a negotiated settlement, like, he's not wrong about that. The problem, however, is that every single other thing that he says before and after is just insane. And it's like so objectively wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. Like it's things that we saw with our own two eyes over the course of the past week. Listening to Republicans at this stage, it feels like undermining truth itself. Once again, I repeat myself when I say lying is OP, please nerf. And what's weird about it is that, like, there is a world where Donald Trump could actually fulfill his narcissistic desires and, like, maybe get a fucking Nobel Peace Prize. You know what I mean? Like, all this stuff. If he was managing this not in the most Trumpian way possible, but instead in a normal way. That's the insanity here, because, like, the Biden administration did unironically have many opportunities for off ramps and refused to take them. Refused to come to the table and be reasonable American leadership that would try to manage some kind of ceasefire. So Trump does have that opportunity. But of course, he's not doing that. He's just doing this insane stuff where he's like, no, I love Russia. Russia is the best. And we're going to give Russia everything. And you can't do anything about it. Which is psychotic.
It's not our country, but you've got to accept cooler heads have got to prevail. This thing cannot go on forever. This is the important point. I'd say this to our, of course, most importantly, the Americans who are watching, but people all over the world. When you talk to leaders in private, whether they're Ukrainian or European, when you talk to people in private, they will tell you this cannot go on forever. There aren't enough Ukrainian lives, there isn't enough American money, and there isn't enough ammunition to fund this thing indefinitely. The only realistic pathway to bringing this thing to a settlement is President Trump's pathway. We encourage both President Zelensky and President Putin to follow that path.
Well, I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent, and this came up in the discussion Friday. The Biden administration called Putin every name in the book, and they've been trying to get the president.
And he still invaded anyway.
Okay, he still invaded anyway. Well, remember, it depends if it's a minor incursion. Let's go back.
The thing that I think is very weird about this is how much America is hurting its own leverage at the table. Like, if it's a proxy, why the hell are you undermining your own proxy? Like, it makes no sense. That's the part where I'm like Trump is, that's the reason why I say Trump, I think, is just like trying to save face and basically say like, oh, Ukraine was the previous administration's failure. Like, I don't want nothing to do with it. And it does not make sense at all. You don't understand the art of the deal. Yeah. Teenager of the year, Hasan banned again, please.
Back to that moment, which I thought as troops were amassing on the border. Yep. But I go back and I think about this, and Biden spent all of this money, called Putin, all of these names. The media and the Democrats, they want Donald Trump to call him names. And the president addressed that.
Thing.
And then he's supposed to call him and say, Vladimir, you ready to talk a peace now? Yeah. That's not going to work.
No, it's diplomacy 101, right? Is you have to have a reasonable relationship with somebody to be able to even start the conversation. We have to remember, Sean, Ukraine, half of the country, a third of the country is totally destroyed. The economy is depressed. You've got hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians. Of course, a lot of dead Russians as well. The president wants to negotiate a settlement. How can you negotiate if you can't even talk to somebody? And that's what he said. He's not saying, like, nobody's suggesting, as Secretary Rubio said, no one is suggesting that we give the Nobel Peace Prize to Vladimir Putin. What we're saying is it's important for
give it to President Trump, please.
President Trump to be able to have a conversation. That's not well served by standing up at a press conference and calling the guy every negative name in the book. By the way, as we just said, President Biden called Putin every single name in the book. What did it lead to? It led to war. It led to destruction. It led to conflict. President Trump is trying to bring this thing to a close. You got to be able to talk to somebody to do that.
Is the door open? President Trump said Friday he can come back if he wants peace. Is that door still open today?
What President Trump has said clearly and consistently is,
like, the American government refuses to call Putin a dictator. Fine. You could say, oh, we don't want to call him a dictator, even though it's obvious he's the party that did a lot of wrong, because we're negotiating with him. That's one thing. But when you pair that up with calling Zelensky a dictator, then all of a sudden, the dynamic shifts a little bit. Do you see what I mean? Like, I get why you wouldn't want to call the guy you're about to fucking set a deal with, the guy that you're bringing to the table to do a negotiated settlement with, like actively shitting on them is probably not going to help your cause if you're trying to put a deal together. But also simultaneously disrespecting your proxy in this process is insane. To desperately save face and make it seem as though Ukraine is not your thing. It was like the Biden thing.
Of course, the door is open so long as Zelensky is willing to seriously talk peace. You can't come into the Oval Office or anywhere else and refuse to even discuss the details of a peace deal. Look, this is not going to make anybody happy. The Russians are going to have to give up stuff. The Ukrainians are going to have to give up stuff. You can't come to the Oval Office and say, give us.
Are you seriously trying to rationalize this as them trying to make a peace plan? No, I'm trying to find rationale behind the fucking insanity. And I'm not going to lie to you, every day it becomes more and more difficult. Like, every day that has gone by, the administration has become increasingly more insane, where I try to make sense of what they're saying, and there is nothing there. Like, it only makes sense to you if you're just, the stuff that they're doing makes sense to you if you've bludgeoned your head with a frying pan over and over again, and you just want someone to go, yeah, no, this is cool, he's owning the libs here. Because, like, the Trump admin actively undermines its own positions from the day prior. You know what I mean? It's not like they have no resistance. So they're just kind of resisting themselves because there's no resistance whatsoever. So they just we'll do stuff and then those things will be bad. So then they'll turn around and be like, all right, we're clawing some of it back. My B. Real 5D chess. I just shit and pissed all over my diapers. And then I smeared it on the walls. And now everyone's saying I smell like shit. That was my 5D chess. Okay, now I'm going to clean up that poop.
Security guarantees, we won't even engage with you about what we're willing to give up. That's been the Ukrainian posture. When that posture changes, as President Trump said, when they're willing to talk peace, I think President Trump will be the first person to pick up the phone. Well,
I got to imagine that they're probably rethinking it. What did you make of European leaders, quote, their voices of solidarity this weekend? Because it's Lindsey Graham, who's been very supportive of Ukraine in this conflict. I mean, he was livid.
Yes.
And he said if they want to now defend their own continent, let them go ahead and do it. Good luck to them.
Yeah, and my message to the Ukrainians, by the way, to President Zelensky is, when you've lost Lindsey Graham, that means you need to come to the negotiating table and recognize Donald Trump is the only game in town. He's the only person who I think has a meaningful plan to save that country. But, Sean, here's the problem with the Europeans. And a lot of these guys are our friends. They're our allies. We, of course, the president has a great relationship with a lot of European heads of state, and so do I, but they need to be realistic. And the craziest part about this, Sean, is that sometimes you'll have European heads of state who in public will puff up their chest and say, we're in it with President Zelensky for the next 10 years. And then in private, they'll pick up the phone and say, this can't go on forever. He has to come to the negotiating table. So I honestly don't.
That's messy. He's being a messy bitch. T. That's messy. That's messed up. I don't think he's lying about this, for the record. I don't. I wish he wasn't such a coward and he leaked it, but leak the DMs, pussy.
I don't care what the Europeans say in public. What I care is what they say in private, and what they need to be saying to President Zelensky is, this can't go on forever. The bloodshed, the killing, the economic devastation.
It's definitely Germany, by the way.
It's making everyone worse off. The only pathway, I think, back to peace and prosperity is what the president is trying to accomplish.
And now we look back in time and we see Joe Biden was beginning to understand that the patience of the American people is running thin.
That's right.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. We're a nation with nearly $40 trillion in debt. Yep. I mean, it's too much.
Well, Sean, this is an important point, though, because I was a United States Senator, for the last 2 years of the Biden administration. I got elected in 2022.
I think you like this job better?
I think I like this job a lot better. I certainly like the president a lot better. And here's the thing, when you would talk to the Biden administration officials in private, this is another example of a terrible situation the Biden admin left the Trump administration. When you ask them what's the plan.
What? I just saw a clip of you laughing at a man whose son is in foster care. What? What are you talking about? This is why people like my standalone YouTube VOD videos better. Oh, Crash Dummies Pod. Oh, it's a Crash Dummies Pod episode joke. Yeah, we had a Crash Dummies Fear and collab again, and it was amazing.
Okay, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. What is your plan? And they would honestly tell you, well, we're just going to send them weapons for as long as we can and hope eventually they can turn the tide. Hope is not a strategy. Throwing money and ammunition at a terrible conflict, that is not a strategy. The only guy in town with a strategy is the President of the United States, and everybody needs to follow his lead.
What scares me is Zelensky, when he says it's going to go on for years, how many more lives are going to be lost? He's not going to have a country to save at the end of that. The minerals deal would have provided the monies to rebuild their country and a strong U.S. presence and maybe European troops as well.
And this is an important part of that. Look, if you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security.
Dude, what sucks about this, aside from all of the senseless cruelty and humiliation that we're subjecting the Ukrainian population to after using and abusing them as cannon fodder and selling them false promises about security, is that this is a very revealing moment about American ambition. A very revealing moment. But because American actions here are so insane, I can't even sit around and gloat because I think about all the Ukrainians that are going to suffer as a consequence of this. But this should be a moment of revelation, a moment where Americans recognize how we do things. Okay, I doubt it though. I bet Putin has some KGB shit on Trump. Is that not extortion? Yes, it is. But that's always been what we do. I think this happening with Trump creates this unique opportunity where instead of having these conversations behind closed doors, they're very brutally honest about it, outwardly honest about it. They don't care about manufacturing consent, and they certainly don't care about like hiding the way that, what the fuck? This is a private moment for JD. I can't believe you guys are exposing him like this. This was a private photo, dude, that he took with his friends and family. Asmongold is calling moderation bias. Yeah, it's so weird because the attitude that most streamers have often had towards Twitch moderation is that we need less bans, not more. But I guess but it's ironic, especially for Asmongold, to turn around and be like, no, we should be banning people longer. I find it really strange that he, of all people, is saying that, considering how many times he gets yelled at by the internet for things that he says on his broadcast. How does he think that is? How does he think that that's going to work out? He said he doesn't care. Huh. He fosters a community biggest. Oh, 100%. I promise you, if he did not have 60,000 people reacting to Donald Trump, he would stop tomorrow. I don't know why people think that this is like completely ridiculous, or people will say, oh, Hasan, excuse your jokes. It's like, no, Asmongold admits this. He don't give a fuck about nothing, dude. He just cares about the numbers. The problem is, it's not even money, it's relevance. He cares more about relevance. He cares more about relevance than he does about money. Make no mistake. I understand Asmongold's ambitions. I promise you I get it. The main difference between him and I is that I have a worldview that I care about, that I want to explain to people and want to bring people onto my side. A couple days ago, he said that he's been reading so much that if he believes something, he's objectively right. Okay. Anyway, like supporting Hamas. I like that you point this out when I'm talking about like that I firmly am committed to. Like, you think that there is a broad popular support for Hamas or even Palestinians in general? No, obviously, when you are pro-Palestinian emancipation, it doesn't matter. Everybody just calls you a fucking terrorist over and over again and demand that you get deplatformed. That is literally the point. Yes, I'm saying no matter how unpopular a certain position might seem, I am committed to advocating for said position because I believe it is correct. Palestinians deserve a right to live free of the Israeli occupation. That's it. Can we stop talking about Asman acknowledging his existence as a problem? I mean, if you want. Glad to see you're back. What is this? Remember my picture of my older brother that went viral a couple years ago? I just wanted to update you. He got his master's today and I couldn't be prouder. That's fucked up. He said he doesn't need to worry about moderation because he's not radical at all, unlike you. In some ways, Asmongold is not wrong. for the new American right that is like unimaginably far right, technically he is firmly championing whatever the far right champions. If tomorrow they become out and about neo-Nazis, he will most likely champion that as well, as long as it still gives him a relatively large audience and a position of prominence. That's it. I'm telling you, dude, I promise you, things change in American politics all the time. Let's say Trump does something truly heinous, okay? And all of his supporters start leaving him in droves, which is not very likely. He has a cult. And Asmongold realizes that the tide is shifting. That is the day that he will switch his political commentary in the opposite direction. He does not care. He's no different than Joe Rogan in many respects, where he will go along with the wins, except he also, just like Joe Rogan, has like certain issues that he does care about. For Joe Rogan, it was always weed, and then it turned into vaccines as well. For Asmongold, it's titties and video games. Beyond titties and video games, I don't think he has like firmly held convictions at all, or any sort of real interest in politics. And I get it. American politics is a spectator sport. That's it. There is no material changes that are coming. That's why so many people say nothing ever happens. Do you understand? And if it's just pure spectacle and a spectator sport, then why shouldn't you take advantage of that by simply looking at the madness and assuming what you perceive is the most popular position you can, which is the position of the obvious incoming government, incoming administration that just won the popular vote. You understand me? Let's see what the people are saying. 52% of Americans back Ukraine conflict with Russia.
Well, I think the easiest way we can kind of just ask this is, do Americans like the way that Trump's handling his job and compare it to how they felt about Joe Biden? So this is the net approval rating. You look at Joe Biden back in 2024, he was 22 points underwater. Holy cow. You look at Donald Trump, it's just a different planet entirely. I mean, the gulf between these two is wider than the Gulf of America or Mexico, depending on which side of the aisle you stand on. He's at +2. So look, at this particular point, Americans are giving Donald Trump the
You're Dan's favorite? Yeah, that's why I've been banned more times than every single one of your favorite content creators on this platform. That was what was always funny, too. Everyone would always be like, Hasan is a PG-13 streamer. That's what Trainwrecks used to say. Banned more times than you. What are you talking about? I've literally been banned more times than Trainwrecks. I've been banned more times than most content creators on this platform. What are you talking about? Anyway,
benefit of the doubt. He's doing considerably better than Joe Biden was doing on the handling of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And so on this simple question, I think Americans are saying, okay, Donald Trump's doing all right on this.
What about specifically on how they feel about bringing the war to an end?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, look, questions on this can be quite complicated, but I think this kind of gets at sort of where the American trend line is. Americans on the Russia-Ukraine war want a quicker end of the war, but Russia keeps...
Bro, I'm going to say something crazy here. The numbers for Israel coming to the table for a ceasefire was like 80%. When will you get permanently banned? Why are you a subscriber to me for 2 months and asking when I'll get permanently banned? I don't know. I dislike you because of the right, and my brother would say you was a terrorist, but then I watched you and I was like, you right, and something we don't see eye to eye on everything, but not crazy. Anyway, it is wild to me that the American attitude towards Israel was like 80% of the American government. 80% of the American voters were like, please do a ceasefire. We need a ceasefire right now. Please stop sending me JD Vances. Oh my God. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. My lolly.
Keeps its captured land. Look at this. 50%. Bare majority coming in here. Support Ukraine's right to fight, even if it means a longer war. That's at 48. This is very, very close. But the trend line on this question is so important because that want a quick end of the war. Look at this. You go back to August of 2022, it was at 31%. Now we're at 50%. I mean, that is a rocket ship upwards in terms of the Americans who want a quick end to the war, even if it means Russia keeps the captured Ukraine land. Americans are moving closer and closer to wanting a compromise, even if it means that Ukraine doesn't really get what it set out to want, at least at the beginning of this war.
And Americans' views on Russia are shifting as well.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why we're seeing this is Americans who say Russia is an enemy. You go back to 2023, it was 64%. In that CBS News YouGov poll, it was down to 34%. Now, there is a chunk that believes that Russia is an unfriendly nation, but the...
Oh, my God. This is incredible. How is that possible? Dude, I swear to God, Americans are the dumbest country on the... Americans are the dumbest people on the planet. Collectively. No. No way. Like, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to think that, like, an entire nation is bad, okay? Or sorry, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to think that that an entire nation of people are not bad, right? It's not a bad thing at all. It's not a bad thing at all. Having said that, it is shocking that after a century of Red Scare, anti-Red baiting, anti-Russia propaganda, USSR, why are you mad? This is good. No. I'm not mad. I'm not mad at all. I wish they would do this about China and every other country, really. But please, if you don't realize that Americans who have been taught to literally despise Russia, scare, could so quickly... No, it's not that they're not falling for Red Scare propaganda anymore. You're wrong. It's entirely Telegram and Trump. I think that's what it is. I think it's straight up Telegram channels, Donald Trump. Like, how malleable Americans are is wild. We literally have developed a audience. I mean, this gives me a little bit of confidence. This gives me a little bit of hope, honestly. All China has to do is just, like, play the right propaganda notes, and maybe it is the Chinese century of prosperity, you know? Because most Americans still think Russia is the Soviet Republic. Most Americans don't think Russia is capitalist. They think communist Russia. Fucking Maxwell Frost, the Gen Z, the Zoomer congressperson, came out and was like, Soviet Russia. I can't believe, like, Trump doesn't want to attack commie Russia, Soviet Russia. Like, what are you saying? You weren't alive when the USSR existed. You were born after it ceased to exist. What do you mean? I think this is truly shocking. I don't think that it's bad to no longer hate any country. Okay, it's good that Americans don't have hate in their hearts for a country. Okay, that makes it harder to do global domination, American imperialism. But it's also alarming how malleable they are. It is alarming how malleable they are. Maybe it presents some semblance of hope for doing counter propaganda, but it's wild to me. This is wild. Why are you defending Russia? What am I watching? Oh my God. This is also partially what I mean. People do not have reading comprehension skills or critical thinking skills in general. I'm simply stating that it is shocking that so many fucking dumb boomers who literally 2 years ago would have said, Commie Russia, USSR, better dead than red, baby, have turned around and are like, Russians are fine, I think. I'm ambiguous towards them. That is like 50 years of propaganda broken in a matter of 2 years, 3 years. That is crazy. Do you not understand how shocking that is? I think maybe if tomorrow every single news media outlet and every single mainstream media apparatus was overtaken by communists or whatever, maybe Americans would also have a positive opinion about commies overnight and communism overnight. If you can brick like almost a century of anti-Russia, anti-USSR propaganda virtually overnight with like a couple $1 million of targeted marketing campaigns, okay, and with the president coming out and being like, they're fine actually, communist still. That's how stupid these people are.
percentage who believe that they're either an ally or friendly, that's up to 34% as well, basically equal to the percentage who say that they're an enemy. So views on Russia have become, let's say, a little less isolated in terms of wanting Russia to be way out there on their own, thinking that they're an enemy. At this particular point, they're starting to see Russia a little bit more friendly, and I think that's part of the reason why Americans want to.
Oh my God, this is also a good point. Russia is more popular than the Democratic Party currently. Democratic Party approval rating, 31%. Russian approval rating in the minds of America is 34%. That's crazy. That is, what the hell?
I see a compromise at this particular hour.
Yeah, and after, this is after invading. This is after invading another country. Damn, dude. Damn. Americans are so wild, brother. America is a wild nation. It is shocking that not every single country on the planet is not freaking out every single day of the week about the fact that a nation comprised entirely of belligerent madmen have nukes and have used them before and have the appetite to use them again. Okay? It's crazy. It actually is crazy. All Vladimir Putin had to do was say, Ukraine is woke and gay, and we're based. And we're gonna break the woke transgender Ukraine's back and make them straight again, make them white again, make them Christian again. And literally everyone was like, that makes so much sense. You could sell communism to the American population by saying anti-communists are woke and gay. Communism is the future because anti-communists are woke, they're DEI, and they're gay.
Security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war.
This is unironically the fucking MAGA communist position, by the way. I'm obviously joking. I don't believe that, okay? Welcome back, Jackson Hinkle.
In 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest. You're not going to do that if you come to the Oval Office, insult the president, and refuse to follow his plan for peace.
If he called, and I hate hypothetical questions.
Sure.
Forgive me. If he called tomorrow and said, I am ready to adopt your plan for peace, he can come back?
I think that if he called and had a serious proposal for how he was going to engage in the process, look, there are details that really matter that we're already working on with the Russians. We've already talked with some of our allies. He needs to engage seriously on the details. I think once that happens, then absolutely we want to talk to the Ukrainians.
Are you convinced Putin and the Russians are willing to meet them, I don't want to say the word halfway, they're willing to do their part to achieve a negotiated settlement?
Am I convinced? No. But do I think that there's a real pathway? You got to trust but verify. You've got to engage in the negotiation. You've got to see what steps people are willing to take. This is another thing, Sean. Obviously, I'm biased because I really love the guy. But when the media attacks President Trump as somehow on the side of Putin, two big problems with that. First of all, the only president in 20 years where you haven't had the Russians take a bunch of territory was under the first term of Donald J. Trump. The second part of that is you've got to actually accept that President Trump, he's not just assuming that everything the Russians tell him is true, he's negotiating with them. There's a give and take. There's a trust but verify. That's called diplomacy.
Bro, stop. Why does he keep saying trust but verify? This is new meta, I think. He just keeps saying that over and over again. What the hell?
Diplomacy, we used to have some respect for that in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Jackson Hinkle went to Hasan Nasrallah's funeral proceedings and then came back to the United States unscathed. Meanwhile, I get fucking cavity blasted every time I walk through TSA. What the hell is going on? Tell me that dude is not a Fed, okay? Tell me that dude is not a federal agent. Jesus Christ. No shit is a Russian proverb? Wait, trust but verify is a Russian, which rhymes in Russian. The phrase became internationally known in English after Suzanne Massey, a scholar of Russian history, taught it to Ronald Reagan, then President of the United States, who used it on several occasions in the context of nuclear disarmament discussions in the Soviet Union. Yeah, I mean, it's more so probably because Ronald Reagan said it, that they're saying it as well. What do the feds benefit for having Jackson on the payroll? I mean, it's super simple. It's much easier to undermine any sort of anti-imperialist thought if you make the person, make a prominent figure of anti-imperialism in the United States, a person who is belligerent and has no like tangible worldview that anyone can associate with. And also, you basically undermine any sort of solidarity, any sort of movement building amongst the left on anti-imperialist boundaries. It's something that it's certainly something that the American government has done before. Yeah, I mean, LaRouche is a great example of this. Exactly. Did LaRouche also have some U.S. State and or intelligence connections? No, you are not mistaken. He literally split a communist party in two. I don't know what this is. I haven't been following on Jackson Hinkle's adventures. Elon got a new haircut. Oh my fuck. No. No, this is old, chatters. This is old. He had this before. This is not new. No, this is an old photo. I remember this. Yeah. Are you going to react to the State of the Union today? Of course I am, Kings.
Americans' economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
Wow. A vice president who is as dumb as he's aggressive. That takes some doing because, Mr. Vice President, that's some random country that's not fought a war. That would be the United Kingdom, who's...
I'm not going to lie, it's pretty funny. When British people get up in their feelings about like Americans being like, you got no smoke.
Alongside your troops in Iraq, not once, but twice, and in Afghanistan.
We're also talking about things overseas.
Y'all wear shorts, man. That's it. That's all I got to say. Okay. Oi, bruvs are offended. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty funny. Yeah. The Keir Starmer openly said after, claiming that he was going to send troops to Ukraine to defend Ukraine, that they would be nothing without U.S. support, that his statements would be meaningless without U.S. support. Oh, I saw this. This is really funny. Jesus, those haters are way too happy about the Hasan ban.
Holy shit, finally Hasan Piker banned on Twitch. Let's go. Now he'll finally have to go outside. Permaban, please, please, permaban.
That's so funny. She thinks she's slick, sleeping over there. I love this video. I saw it yesterday. Did you see her Google
Holy shit,
searches?
Finally.
Dog treats cheap. Where is squirrel? I can't read this one.
Piker.
Pure duck.
Banned on.
All right, let's keep going. Ukrainians vow to continue fight as Trump administration pauses military aid to Ukraine.
The president has taken a dramatic step to get President Zelensky of Ukraine to begin talks on a ceasefire with Russia. Yesterday, President Trump put all U.S. aid to Ukraine on hold. They're calling it a pause. U.S. military aid for Ukraine is critical as they fight a war that Vladimir Putin started 3 years ago now. MTS Tayyab is in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, with more on all this. MTS, I can't imagine the mood there this morning. Good morning to you.
Yeah, a lot of nerves and a lot of uncertainty. Good morning, Tony. Well, a Ukrainian official has told CBS News the Trump administration's suspension of military aid to Ukraine gives the country only around 6 months before it starts running short of vital ammunition, as the White House continues to pile pressure on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to pursue peace with Russian leader Vladimir Putin.
We will feel it in the future.
Following Friday's Oval Office shouting match heard around the world,
don't tell us what we're going to feel.
The nightmare scenario for Ukraine has been revealed. President Trump has announced the U.S. would pause billions of dollars in military assistance to the Zelensky government.
Well, I just think you should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe.
The revelation has sent shockwaves across the war-battered country as Ukrainian morning shows broke the news.
President США Donald Trump.
Mikhailo Podolyak is a top advisor to President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Can Ukraine defeat Russia without the support of the U.S. and President Trump?
What I can say for sure is that Ukraine will still fight. But I will ask you a question. Would the U.S. be okay to stay on the sidelines when we need to stop Russian aggression? And what does Russia want to do? It wants to destroy the world that was built by previous American administrations. It's a world these Ukrainian soldiers say they're trying to defend. We were at a military trauma ward in Kyiv for those injured on the battlefield. where we met Alexei, a grandfather and volunteer soldier in his 50s who was being treated for shrapnel wounds to his leg and hips from a Russian shelling. Alexei also suffered a war injury to his arm a year ago and still went back to fight.
So you're going to keep fighting no matter what?
Of course, he says, for the sake of my granddaughter.
And as Ukrainian leaders grapple with what to do next, they will no doubt increasingly turn to European partners who already provide just over 50% of the military assistance Ukraine receives. As Russia's war rages on, overnight the Kremlin launched major drone strikes on the cities of Sumy and Odessa. Tony.
MTS tie-up for us in a nervous. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Obviously, I'm here to talk about my friend Bridge Colby. I think he'll make a great policy lead at the Department of Defense. It's why the president nominated him. And I just wanted to be here to give a word of encouragement, a word of approval, and just lend my reputation to Bridge's confirmation, because I think he's a really important person for us to have at the Department of Defense. We have gone for too long letting our industrial base get degraded, allowing our troops to not even have the munitions that they need to fight the wars of the future. President Trump really believes in peace through strength, but a core part of peace through strength is ensuring that our troops have the weapons that they need in order to fight the next war, if God forbid it necessarily comes. So Bridge is an important part of that defense policy. I think the Senate will confirm him, and I'm glad to be here and speak on his behalf. Happy to take a few questions if you guys have them.
Does possible aid for Ukraine leave Ukraine vulnerable right now and give Russia an advantage?
Look, what the president has said very clearly about our Ukraine policy is that he wants the Ukrainians to come to the negotiating table. We want the Ukrainians to have a sovereign and an independent country. We think the Ukrainian troops have fought very bravely, but we're
What is that noise, man?
at a point here where neither Europe nor the United States, nor the Ukrainians can continue this war indefinitely. So it's important that everybody come to the table, and the president is trying to send a very explicit message. The Ukrainians have got to come to the table and start negotiating with President Trump.
Do you still have hope for the mineral deal? Do you believe that the mineral deal can still be reached with Ukraine?
Yeah, I certainly do. And I think the president is still committed to the mineral deal. I think we've heard some positive things, but not yet, of course, a signature from our friends in Ukraine. But look, the mineral deal is a really important part of the president's policy. Number one, the American people have got to get some payback for the incredible financial investment we've made in this country. A lot of the aid that the Europeans have sent has come in the form of money that is getting repaid to them. Well, it's really ridiculous and frankly an insult to the American people that the Europeans are getting a better deal than the American people. The president is just trying to assure.
Dude, I don't like that. Oh God, it's so wild that they just like keep talking about Americans are not getting a good deal. Like, on the one hand, I should be excited at the prospect of them basically demonstrating the only thing that they care about. Okay? But on the other hand, this also means that Ukrainians are getting shafted in the process. Like, aggressively shafted in the process. So I can't even sit here and gloat about being like, see, they don't care about anything. They don't care about Ukrainian emancipation. And it's not unique to the Trump administration either. It's just that the Democrats are better at, masquerading as reasonable people and actively making it seem as though they have an emancipatory interest here.
That the American people get a fair deal, while simultaneously ensuring we have access to some minerals and resources that are very important for the economy of the future.
If Zelensky's focus is gratefulness, as you guys have talked about, would there be a consideration of bringing the aid back on, or is that an indefinite pause, a long-term pause? Do you see it?
No, look, the president has been very clear. He wants the Ukrainians to come to the negotiating table. I think when the Ukrainians come to the negotiating table, everything is on the table.
What about the pressure on Russia?
President Zelensky?
Look, I think the most important thing, a lot of people have made this about public statements. President Zelensky needs to say that he's committed to the peace, or President Zelensky needs to apologize to the president. The public stuff doesn't matter nearly as much as what are the Ukrainians doing to meaningfully engage on what a peaceful settlement will look like. We need the Ukrainians privately to come to us and say, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is how we're going to participate in the process to end this conflict. That is the most important thing. And that lack of private engagement is what is most concerning to us.
So far, it looks like a lot of pressure.
His face is not edited. That's his actual face.
On Ukraine, but not much pressure on Russia. Do you expect to do maybe more sanctions on Russia or any other steps to pressure both sides if you want to have them on a negotiation table?
Well, I don't think that's right, actually. I mean, we still have a number of sanctions that are placed on the Russians. We do believe that the Russians economically are struggling because of this conflict. We do believe that it's in Russia's best interest, but also Ukraine and the United States' best interest to bring this conflict to a close. So we believe in applying pressure to everybody to stop the killing, because that's what the president's policy is, and that's what's in the best interest of the American people.
President, you characterized it as a deal being a long way away. You just said if the Ukrainians came privately to the negotiating table, I could get things moving. What are we talking about timeline here? Like, how fast can we get things
moving? President Trump said that, or President Zelensky said
that? I believe that President Trump had characterized it as being a deal being a long way away.
So I know that President Zelensky said that, but what I think the president has said is that we can make a deal. The Russians can't continue this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't continue it forever. And most importantly, the United States can't continue it forever. Look, there are a lot of details to be worked out. There are a lot of questions about territory, about everything else. We want to have that conversation. We're not saying that we're committed to one pathway or another. We're just saying you can't even bring the peace to the forefront.
Bro, the final stage of this is America invading Ukraine alongside Russia. They're going to be like, yeah, no, you want a true presence? You got true presence. Okay, that's right. I'm joking. They don't have nearly enough oil reserves for America to do such a thing. Okay, America's literally gonna invade Ukraine and actually start blowing up Ukraine at this point. What the hell? What are we doing?
Forefront if the Ukrainians aren't willing to negotiate in good faith. And right now, they haven't been willing to. Hopefully that changes.
Do you think that European peacekeepers are a non-starter for the Kremlin?
Four GOP sources say Rubio. Four GOP sources says Rubio's told people he's upset by his lack of foreign policy influence despite being the administration's top diplomat. One said they felt as though Rubio's often the last to know when foreign policy decisions are made in the White House. Amazing. Oh, you deserve it, you fucking bitch. I hate him. Oh, Jesus Christ. I think this is more so to save face, by the way. It's just, I'm sure he has more influence than he lets on, but he also recognizes that the final say is completely out of his hands. So when they do embarrassing stuff like this and he just sits there with this face on, basically he's just leaking to the media that like, oh, this is not my decision. Be making very different decisions if it were up to me.
Kremlin, do you think that could realistically be a part of the solution or no?
Megaphonics, send me the full thread of JD Vance edits like maybe 45 more times. I probably will click on it on the 46th or 47th time probably. No matter what you do, don't stop sending me that link, okay?
I won't speak for the Kremlin. I don't know what is a non-starter or not for the Kremlin. I know that obviously, and we appreciate.
Holy moly. Haploids, thank you for the 50 bones. 50 big ones. God damn. God damn. Hype train incoming. Why?
This, the British and the French have offered to step up in a big way. That's very, very important. But fundamentally,
if you subscribe, you can send me links like Megaphonics is, okay? And I most likely will not click on them, but maybe I will. Yeah. 99% of chatters stop sending links right before I click on them. Don't ever give up.
The question of what's a non-starter for this or that
Silex,
party,
thank you for the 100 big ones.
Negotiated settlement we have to come to. We can't even really start that negotiated process in earnest until the Ukrainians, led by President Zelensky, come to the table.
What do you need to see from Canada in terms of...
Go ahead, man. Yeah.
Mr. Colby has said in the past that the U.S. could tolerate or contain a nuclear armed Iran. How is that consistent with the president's maximum pressure policy?
Well, number one, the president's been very clear he doesn't want to tolerate a nuclear armed Iran. And I don't know what Mr. Colby has written in the past, but I'll say that every single person that we nominate to a position is going to have at least one thing that they disagree with the president about. That's okay, but the president's policy is extremely clear. We cannot tolerate nuclear
Thank you for the 20 gifted.
Especially in Iran. That will be the policy of the administration. It has been, and it was during the first Trump administration.
What do you need to see from Canada to roll back these tariffs?
Look, the president's going to have conversations.
I'm going to be honest with you. Jedediah Vance is so good at eating shit. He is the perfect VP for Trump. He is the perfect vice president for Trump. He has a way to communicate to liberals using like liberal language. And he is, more importantly than anything else, a rapacious ass kisser. Why has Europe not actually proposed a deal that would be accepted by both sides? Let's be honest here about the reality of conflict. Europe and the Democrats understand how this will end. I think they're just not at the table. That's probably why. I suspect that they just don't have really. So they're kind of trying to, on the one hand, deal with like the tariffs, and on the other hand, trying to deal with what the American administration's current foreign policy attitudes are.
With the Canadians, we need to see real engagement on the fentanyl issue, on the drug issue. That is fundamentally the underlying element.
Speaking of links, you need to subscribe to the Chinese YouTuber that hit the algorithm, and he's amazing, very wholesome content from a nice guy. Love that. Katan, thank you for the 25. Get the subs. Hype Train, level 7 achieved. Goddamn.
Is we think the Canadians have not been serious about stopping the drug trade. Now, people will sometimes say, well, if you look at the numbers, the Mexicans send way more fentanyl into the United States than the Canadians do. The Canadians have allowed a lot of fentanyl to come into the country.
Wait, what is this? You're not going to believe how the hogs are defending Trump tariffs? Oh, come on, chat. Take a day off, chatter. God damn it. I got so excited. I was salivating at the prospect of a hog watch moment. The British tabloids tomorrow, lest he forgets, Roe is Trump halts military aid to Ukraine. U.S. Vice President accused of insulting our dead. Trump deputies vile slur on Brit heroes. Vance Land, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my Lord. But 636 of our troops died in Afghanistan and Iraq fighting alongside the U.S. Clown Vance's slur on 636 war heroes. Blundering U.S. Vice President says Britain has not fought a war in 40 years. British media is so hostile. Yeah, get them. Let them fight. It's a real let them fight. It's a real let them fight moment because, like, both parties are, both of the parties involved in this are just demons in their own right. Okay, let them fight each other. Let them eat each other out. Yeah, you heard me. You heard what I said. Oh, meanwhile, watch you for